so the companies that I've observed firsthand are doing a spectacular job. Their leadership have stepped up. Never waste a crisis is what I would say to you. It brings out the best in people. It can bring out the worst, but on the whole, it brings out the best in people. I'll start with what do we look for when at an organisation. What we tend to do is talk more about what are the objectives and key results that the company is trying to achieve. So sometimes people will say, what's an objective? Well, you could say it's an organisational outcome. If you studied a company's strategy, you would typically see what are the things that they want to be known for in, say 5 years from now. And what are the key things that they think that will get them there? Those things you can then distill out of it. So what are the key objectives and outcomes? And what are the key results that you want to see? An example for a retailer might be, our objective within 5 years is to have expanded our online shop presence and reduced the number of physical stores that we have. The key result we want to see is that we have doubled our profits and that we have reduced our rental costs and our building footprint. The reason why this is where I start with these conversations is you then, what's meaningful to measure is how those objectives and key results are then broken up into near-term slices of that. So what's the first year horizon that you would want to see? So of your 5-year horizon, what might you see in the next calendar year? What would you like to see in the following calendar year, etc.? When we talk about how people feel, measuring that can be as simple as we used to just have an email that was sent out once a week to everybody that just simply was a happiness indicator, from a scale from really grumpy, like at the airport when you go through and say this service was good or it was bad. It was just a similar scale. You just hit it, and because it came in your mailbox in the first time of the day, it meant that it was typically the first email you read and you just went, yeah, I'm great, or I'm grumpy, or I'm whatever. And it would then immediately give you a chart that showed you how the rest of your team feels compared to you, how the rest of the organisation feels compared to you. And it actually was not just a way of you contributing how you were feeling, but it also gave you a relativity. So it allowed you to reflect back, if everyone in the company is feeling fine and I'm not, then why am I not? If everyone in my team is feeling good, then why am I not? Or I'm feeling great, why is the rest of my team not feeling great?
I love the fact that the measure you just mentioned there isn't a mega measure, because some companies go, once a year, we will do a huge happiness survey of our staff. And it comes on the 1st of December and, we'll let everyone know the results in February. And the second thing I want to observe is when people ask me, how do you measure success of what you're doing? I sort of go, well, how do you measure your company's success currently? If those measurements are right, we just want to make them better, don't we? We don't just want to measure how good we can do Scrum. We want to measure how effective it is.
So as a program of work or as a group of people, what we do is the first thing we do is we sit down and say, what do we think are the achievable results that we can get given our understanding of our initiative? Yep. So we don't get set targets and we deliberately don't try and impose targets. What we do instead is say, we're taking it from the hypothesized theory of the business case that says we should run this initiative because we think, broadly speaking, it should give us this result. Yep. The first thing we do is, as a department or as a team, is test that. So what's our level of confidence in our ability to deliver on those objectives, and what do we think are the reasonable key results that we would therefore be able to achieve? When you impose targets on people, it invokes a whole series of adverse behaviours, most of which are the antithesis of what the Agile values and principles are trying to drive. So instead, if you are inviting people to provide their input to, we're the team that's going to deliver this, what do we think are the reasonable results that we can deliver? And then you have enough constructive challenge because, in order to ensure that teams aren't underbaking in order to overachieve, as an example, that there's some obvious challenges that happen from people in the organisation, such as finance. They might do some testing and quizzes about this. or your executive sponsor might also quiz, is that really as far as we think we can get? And these are facilitated conversations. We avoid the scenario where sponsors and key people in positions such as finance and investment aren't bulldogging and bulldozing people to sign up to things that they can't. It's actually a very constructive and realistic test of what can be achieved. What we then do, of course, is as we go and break that down into, so what are we going to try and do for that in this sprint or this quarter? We break those objectives and key results down even further.
I can connect it to what Sunil just mentioned the other day about everything in complex adaptive system when we are making changes hypotheses. So we need to also consider that as a change maker or as a change agent, as an agile practitioner who bringing change to an organization or a team of teams. So that's really insightful. Thank you for sharing.
I was then going to talk about some of the telemetry that you might use to help support the changes in mindsets and behaviors and language. So part of the balanced scorecard that we create for teams is the input comes from surveys that we take very regularly. So say at the end of a sprint, we'll ask the team questions such as, how well does your product owner clearly articulate the vision, the scope, and provide you with clear prioritization of the work at hand? And then we give them a fixed scale of never, usually, always, or there's a category there for going above and beyond. And whenever you say above and beyond, it's a mandatory, you must provide the rationale for why it's above and beyond.
Your reason, yeah.
And then at the very end of these sort of behavioral questions, which there's one that's for the team about the Scrum Master, which we now call Iteration Manager, by the way, to be method agnostic. There's also one from the Scrum Masters and the team for the product owners. Then each of the product owners have one for the chief product owner. And so each of these sort of roll up and are independent perspectives. But at the very bottom of each, we also ask for, and what is the, would you ask your, whoever it is that you're providing feedback on, to do differently? And then I give them a couple of different examples, such as more, better, less, different, or stop, start, continue. I give them a few options as to how they might respond, but it's to provoke constructive feedback. These things are the results of these surveys, and how they then play into both our coaching of the teams and the people, as well as what we measure and report on, show the grassroots genuine feedback, which is fearless because it's anonymous. No one knows where the feedback's come from. It's designed to be constructive.
You're distinguishing between what is commonly taught as lead and lag indicators, and what you're indicating there is, I always say a lead indicator is something that gives you information you can do something about pretty much there and then.
Whenever you look at what people are measuring and what you wish to measure, always think about the behavior that might start to produce in people. I also prefer never to use KPIs as a term. I prefer to call them metrics that matter, and I often use the term telemetry. And the reason why I use that term is I borrowed it, I stole it with what was it? Stole it with style.
Style with pride.
With pride.
Steal with pride.
Artistic.
A description was given to me once about you need to treat the things that you measure a bit like the telemetry in a cockpit of a plane. Whilst there are some indicators on the cockpit that say something bad has happened, like all the oxygen's disappeared out of the plane, that's pretty much bad in any circumstance, right? But all the rest of the indicators are there as telemetry to tell you the current state of your flight. So, by way of example, the indicator that tells you that you're ascending, ascending is not a good or a bad thing unless it's not what you want to be doing at the time, right? So if you are ascending at the time that you're trying to land, then that indicator is telling you something you need to interpret and say, okay, this is not what I would expect to see right now. What does it mean? Similarly, if you showed low fuel at takeoff, well, that's in that context is not a good indicator in that situation, but it's actually not a bad one as you are in the final steps of landing the plane. So the telemetry that you create, first of all, try to create it so that it's informing you of a state as opposed to informing you of a definitive red, amber, green. So, you know, that is, it's either bad or it's getting bad or it's okay. So that would be my first piece of feedback on that. Measuring what matters. When I look at the measures that we construct, I deliberately avoid and remove or create a different measure to take away and drive us away from the habits that we don't want people to have and drive people towards the habits that we do want them to have. An example of this would be if what we're measuring is the profitability of a team. That measure can drive very bad behaviors. So it can drive behaviors such as overutilizing the people that are in the team. So they can't work at a sustainable pace because people believe that taking costs out includes removing headcount, and because it's one of the quickest costs you can cut from an organization is just simply remove people, and you're no longer paying them and all the associated costs to having people on the team. So when you design your measures, what you're trying to do instead is design ones that are driving the right behaviors. You'll see behind me is what looks like a Celtic knot, yep, which says collaborate, deliver, reflect, and improve. And it's a continuous loop. So at the heart of everything we do is about working together, delivering an outcome of some kind, reflecting regularly and improving on that and being on that endless loop. And that is the path for all of us, in my view.